Welcome to a same sort of feature where we got Blackstone Minerals sort of sharing with us what they've been doing over this period where they're looking at their feasibility studies. I've got Tessa Kutcher here talking to us about how Blackstone continues to keep investors and shareholders engaged. Tessa, welcome.
Good to be here.
Maybe just give us an intro of your role and then just tell us how you keep Blackstone in people's faces.
Yeah, will do. My role, I'm the corporate affairs advisor at Blackstone Minerals. So I mainly really look after Scotty and the team in all terms of, keeping the company up and running, engaging with investors, engaging with shareholders. A big part of my role is the whole social media side of things that really picked up for junior miners, I think. That's something that is probably interesting to talk about, how we use media and social media to keep in touch with our shareholders, to get our news flow out, to make sure the Blackstone story is understood and goes out there.
And then you're playing it down a bit because obviously Scotty's and Blackstone is one of the most prevalent that I see out on social media, and there must be a strategy or a belief how you do it, because we all sort of say that engagement is a long-term thing. It's not a one blast event.
Yeah.
Share with us what the thoughts are and how you guys plan this out, or if there is a plan.
Yeah, I'll probably start with a bit of the story behind it, or how we started. So when I came on board about 18 months ago, I was mainly really coming on board to look after the social media. So Scott has always been, and everyone that knows you, Rooster Talk and Coffee with Samson knows Scotty is a big fan of telling the story. So Scotty has always been really engaged and really good with anything on social media. He's always been very active on LinkedIn, always been very active on Twitter. And I guess at one point, 18 months ago, he probably just needed some extra help and some extra support with that, because it is actually, it looks so easy and it looks quickly done, but it's actually a lot of work behind it. So I started with the main job to get more engagement, even to maybe build a bit of a social media strategy behind it, and to look after the different accounts, to come up with new ideas, and to really sort of be the point where all the media and social media stuff comes together, so I can streamline it and get the story out. Back then there wasn't really a strategy, and I have to say I was a bit thrown in the cold water. So I got myself up and running, learned a lot about social media, learned a lot about how Twitter works, how LinkedIn works, even Facebook and Instagram. Learned a lot about engagement rates, about click rates, what's the difference, what is actually real engagement. And did a lot of research myself about what are other companies doing, and I did have a look at companies that are not mining stocks, because I thought there is not much out there apart from the big ones, say BHP, putting things on social media, but that's all very a perfect story. So I wanted to do something a bit more real, probably. And I thought social media is a great way to interact and to get people interested in a story. It's also a great way to sometimes maybe be a bit cheeky and use my own accounts, use Scotty's accounts, use our team accounts to actually initiate discussions, let everyone have a different view, and get some opinions out, because I think that's actually what social media is good for. Started to look into what could be interesting apart from the regular news flow. So let's say we get an announcement out, and for sure I want to make sure that our investors and our shareholders and anyone interested sees that. So that's one main thing. Every time we get an announcement out, I do put a little post on social media channels. with a little teaser to just summarize it. So yeah, that's something I guess nowadays most of the other companies do also. But then I started looking into things, how do we actually educate? How do we use social media to educate the market and to help us with that education to understand our story better, because it's a quite complex story. So yeah, I guess it's a bit like writing a book, to think about a narrative that you want to be told over the stages that we are going through, from scoping study to pre-feasibility study, downstream and upstream, to DFS, to actually getting that mine back into operation. And I really looked at the whole picture and thought, okay, what do I have to educate the market about? What story do I have to tell around those milestones? And how can that help with understanding our story better?
I guess it's a bit like watching I tell people the best sort of analogy that I can think of is telling a story, a movie, where if you miss the first part, like one of these Pulp Fiction thing, if you miss one part, you actually don't get why the relevance of things. And I think and it falls back to what I initially said, was it's like branding, right? It's in every industry that we know, in every commercial part of business that we know, there's a concept of branding. But for some reason, our sector doesn't think that we need to brand, and everyone's just there waiting for us, and I think this part where it leads to, I mean, where people used to market and things like that. I remember watching this 5 years ago now, where the guy said that people used to congregate in the jungle, and if you go hunting there now, they're no longer there because they're all hanging around ponds called Google, ponds called Facebook or LinkedIn. They're no longer in that centralized place where we used to go to.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts to that, the transition from how we used to look at things to where things are now?
I think it's quite interesting. Even probably a year ago, if I wanted to know what investors and shareholders think about our news flow, think about the company, I would go on a platform like Hot Copper, let's say, have a look at the chats and see people discussing the stock, see people discussing news flow, and it's actually amazing how much knowledge and how many insights you get from those platforms, which is still the case, but I think it shifted a lot from those platforms or people just really going to the ASX and having a look at charts to now using Twitter. I think Twitter became a major investor forum, actually, shareholder forum, even over the past 6 months. It really picked up. So I think people use it to, described it a bit last week. Someone was posting something on Twitter saying, why are all those people on Twitter now sharing, their insights about stocks? So what happened to the good old, I do my own research and read an analyst report, because that's what you should do, right? And I just commented saying, I think you still read the analyst report, because that's the right thing to do if you really want a good insight and you want the whole background. But Twitter is probably a bit like the talk at the copier or the coffee machine in the office, being, in the morning and discussing, so I bought this stock yesterday, so why? And then you get your colleagues and your friends' insights, because you don't always want the professional to tell you. Sometimes you really want to talk with your friends about what you're investing at. And I think that's what Twitter really picked up. And I think it's been amazing. And I think people on Twitter share their knowledge and are happy to share their knowledge. And plus, what I think, and that's something about social media, I mean, look at Trump on Twitter. You can think about him what you want.
He's a master of Twitter.
He is, with this whatever he got out on tweets, which was 90% interesting. let's place it like this. But it worked. People read it, people commented, people talked about it. So in the end, Twitter can even be used to, you know, as I said earlier, be a bit cheeky. Maybe just put some questions out there. So I use it, for example, now to, you can do those polls where you say, look, what's your top 5 or top 4 uranium stocks this week? And it's not all about just Blackstone. It's really to understand what the market is doing and feeling, and get some insights there, and actually just really listening to people and have a real interaction with your shareholders. Because back in the days, they used to call, right? And they still do sometimes, but that gets less and less important, I think. So rather than a shareholder having to call the company, trying to get the MD or the investor relations person on the phone and asking all those questions, you can really interact with them like straight away. And Scotty does the same, so do I, so does the whole team. So we are all on there and trying to, you know, interact and give insights, because every one of us has different expertise also. So we bring different views about Blackstone or about the market to that social media platform. So yeah,
I think in some ways, Twitter, LinkedIn, I mean, I use mainly Twitter and LinkedIn for the, you know, it's the SAMSO kind of work and things like that. That I find that when you're communicating with your audience, like you mentioned, you know, tweeting on this, putting a poll on this, you create a sense of sincerity, which then is a branding thing. People go, you know, Tessa or Scotty or Blackstone or something. It immediately has that attachment that because it's all about creating your profile, as we all know, right? It's the favorite catchphrase for social media these days. And then once you create that sincerity along with your engagement, then that is exactly what it is meant to be.
Yeah.
If and you the stigma, that the whole mud sticks kind of concept works on good and bad, right? So I think that's why I think, you know, a lot of the, I mean, people still go to your forum sites to comment and talk about things. There is a place for that, but I think before maybe it was the only place you go to, whereas now Twitter and LinkedIn are the next sort of platforms that people use. And in some ways too, Google today is overtaking your need to have that specific place, right? Whatever you do, it's in Google space, and it's the only space. Yeah. So when you want something, you go to Google. So no matter where you put it, it's there.
It's somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. So whether you've pushed it out, so Twitter, LinkedIn, and all the other sites are your distribution channels to Google space, right? I call them God. It's almost Google God now. So if it's an open platform, your words spread out more, and over time, you create that momentum, right?
Yeah.
For you guys, when you do your work, is there a preference for one or the other, like Twitter, LinkedIn, something, or you?
It changes. It changed. I think it's probably coming back to how our how Blackstone works, how our corporate culture is. We've got values that we defined earlier this year, and one of the values is agility. And I think we are very agile, all of us. And I think we are the same with not having a preferred platform. Probably 3 months ago, I would have said LinkedIn. Now it's Twitter. It changes for many different reasons. I think LinkedIn is, and don't get me wrong, they are not the same. They have got different audience. You put different content on it. It's a lot of companies are doing the good old, you know, I put it on LinkedIn, copy and paste, put it on Twitter, copy and paste, put it on Facebook, copy and paste, put it on Instagram. I don't think that works at all, because it is actually different audiences and different outcome that you've got. I think LinkedIn always has been great for Blackstone, because talking about branding, how did we start that Blackstone brand? It's probably Scott's face. I can
Don't say it too loud.
I can tell you then, when I'm his assistant too in my role, and whenever I schedule a coffee intro with someone or a first meet with someone, I do never have to worry that people don't know what he looks like, because he is constantly, like one of our colleagues said, every morning when I go on LinkedIn, the first thing is I see Scotty's face. And it's probably true, but that's good branding, isn't it?
Well, that's what it's about.
Exactly. Everyone knows him. He does Rooster Talk, Coffee with Sams or with you. He does a lot of interviews, and I think it's quite important that his face is out there, because it's his company. It's what, if he stands behind it, believes in it, that gives me as a also shareholder a certain security that this is a good project. If the MD hides, what do I think about this company? So he needs to be out there. He needs to talk about things. He needs to be very present, I guess. And that's what LinkedIn is really, really good at. LinkedIn has been great for me also to really get in contact with people that, are probably, I don't have contact details. Let's say, whenever I want to really talk maybe to a fund, I try to really contact them on LinkedIn, not with the good old connect. I do put our story there and say, look, this is us. And I know we all get this on LinkedIn. We all get 25 messages a day in the inbox saying, this is something that is really interesting, have a look. I'm maybe one of the only ones that actually goes through all of them and reads them and see maybe there is something that is interesting for me. So I'm a strong believer in you can create connections, business connections on LinkedIn. It can always be a first step, and it, as I said, has worked quite well for us. I guess Twitter over the past month became more and more interesting, probably after our downstream PFS. I think after we released that PFS, the stock got people look at us in a different way now. They understand more. They are more interested. It's the next stage. They can see there is a project, there's something progressing. And they started talking about the stock on Twitter. And over, as I said, the past 3 months, Twitter has become an amazing platform of people actually sharing their knowledge about Blackstone. And it's a bit like a free investor relations tool, because that's all we want. We want to interact with people, but we also want people to educate each other about the stock. And I think that's what really picked up over the last 3 months. So I would say now, Twitter is probably where I put the most focus on at the moment.
I think it's really, really interesting and need to be highlighted is you use the word educate a lot. And I think that's where a lot of social media I see from our sector falls down is they're telling instead of educating. And I think that's very important. I know I do a lot of talks with Scotty and we always have a great time, but it's the way you explain things, and people, a lot of investors out there just want to know why, what does it mean, and we love throwing the word PFS, all these kinds of, but a lot of people go, what does that actually mean, and I still remember that conversation I had with Scotty. It says, Scotty, can you just tell us what that means and how it pans out, so do you guys focus on that word, educate?
I do, because I think, and I'm coming from maybe that's where I brought a bit of a different strategy in. So I'm also an investor, and how do I invest in stocks? That's why I looked at myself and thought, what do I find interesting, or where do I see the need to educate more or whatever. So I use Twitter, LinkedIn, and so on to have a look at stocks. So for example, if I see a project, I'll take us as an example. We are in Vietnam. Recently someone said to me, if your project was in Australia, you would have been triple the market cap. Probably true. Why is that? Because Vietnam is a bit of an uncertain country. People don't know much about the country. And if you don't know much, then you assume, and assumptions are bad. So what do? I try to educate about Vietnam, and there is a country risk, but I can always say we're probably not West Africa, so it could be even more complicated. But I just want to make sure people understand this is Vietnam, this is the risks, and we are not, whitewashing things, because that's stupid also. But I can give as much country information as I can. I can actually talk about our community there. I can actually show people what it looks like. And all this that is education, and I can do this on Twitter. That doesn't really talk about a PFS or DFS. It talks about just this part of the project, the country. Something else, what is nickel? I really tend to start basic and say, as an investor, everyone knows why to invest in gold, but why should I invest in nickel? So I need to understand what is nickel, what it's used for, where does it go, there's different types of nickel, where can I find it, is it hard to mine? All this is something, and that's education, that makes a difference for investors, I guess.
And whether you actually have a mine.
Exactly. Yeah.
Don't forget that part.
True. So yeah, I think that's why I think education is the key, always the key. But for me, it gives me, all those social media platforms give me a tool to talk to investors about, Vietnam, nickel, battery manufacturers, OEMs, all this. Yeah.
So I guess, it's obviously I come from the point where I'm saying, hey, it's great, you should engage, you should do this. But from a company point of view, I guess, to conclude the conversation, what would you say to sort of your counterparts in your industry, say, how they should embrace it? Because a lot of them still don't. Some don't even have a Twitter account or a LinkedIn account. Some may have a LinkedIn account, but they've never been activated or use it, Maybe you could sort of preach to them and say, that 5 simple steps of doing it, in that sense. Because it's amazing how many people still don't embrace this, right? Whereas they're still doing the old sort of ways of doing things. So what would that 5-minute preach be from Tessa?
You would be, it is for free. It would be stupid not to give it a go. I think nowadays everyone has a Facebook account, an Instagram account. Well, I wasn't on Twitter before I started for Blackstone, and now I am, and I learn a lot. So set your account up and just start interacting with people, start following people, and then start understanding what you can actually do with it. And I think, it's an amazing form of interacting, educating, and getting the story out there.
Yeah, I think that's the key is just getting the story out there, and I've even learned things like our sector is so behind that the social media platforms that we have are still very new to our audience. And I've just now learned that, with Instagram, you could do reels, which actually now creating, like I would put a simple post out on Instagram, and I don't use Instagram a lot because I feel like the population is not there, but I'll get 5 views. But the reels will get 2,000 or 50s or hundreds, which is a magnified volume, right? So try things out.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's always a good time for every different platform, like Instagram. We've got an Instagram account. I'm not using it at all at the moment, but I will, because in the end, Instagram needs a product, I guess. So you need to have something that you can touch and show. And I guess for us, it's going to become more and more interesting when we go into production, because then we've got something to show. We can start showing things. We've got a community there. you know, we can start talking about our community, about our people. That's something to touch. So Instagram, there is a platform for everything. And I think Instagram is probably, we sit together again in 6 to 12 months, and I probably tell you that Instagram is my new Twitter.
Yeah. I always tell people you want to be the sore thumb.
Yeah.
You want to go where people aren't. And I think, you know, like you guys embrace Brilliant Online as well. And
Yeah.
and I always tell people that you go there and you're the only business section.
Yeah.
Everyone's looking for lifestyle, and suddenly there's this there. So you know, throw that,
Yeah.
use that sore thumb
Yeah.
mentality, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So thank you, Tessa, and beautiful day. So but let's keep talking, and you know, it's a really good topic, and I've really been chasing you, haven't I?
Yeah, definitely.
Finally got Tessa
Finally.
on the table, because I think you sort of encompasses, and especially Blackstone, without a doubt, you guys are most prevalent there, and obviously then you guys have a plan, and that's where I sort of saw where this conversation would be. So you're
Yeah.
the perfect person to sort of tell the industry, you know, or that it works, right?
Yeah, it does.
works.
Thank you very much, Noel. Good to talk.